a suggestion or a proposal that it must be BRICS Plus. And when you say BRICS Plus, it doesn't really give a strong indication of all members participating fully. And therefore, that is Brazil's position. Secondly, President Lula played a very important role when he was president, before he left office and now making a comeback, in the strengthening of the South-South. It is a bigger bloc. You know that President Ramaphosa has invited some leaders from the South-South. So he is saying that you have to strengthen the South-South. And I think these are the discussions that are likely going to happen during the summit. But also we know that the technocrats have concluded the documents of the summit. In relation to the extension, now they will present that document to foreign affairs ministers tomorrow. And the foreign affairs ministers tomorrow will then look at the document and finally present the document to heads of state and government, and the 5 leaders will take a decision in terms of the expansion. Yesterday, President Ramaphosa indicated that he is in support of the expansion. Of course, it's no surprise because South Africa benefited from the expansion because initially this group was called BRIC.
Yeah, I'm keen to also just to look at the visuals, to talk about the pomp and ceremony, because when you have so many leaders converging on the country, one can imagine just the military might that is necessary here from South Africa's side as well, Sophie, just how much work we need to be putting in as well. And a curious question as well, as one would expect perhaps that when you see international dignitaries like these arriving at Waterkloof, this time actually arriving at OR Tambo, do we know why this is?
Well, you know that when you have these large summits, you have a situation where OR Tambo is also available to receive some of these plates. Others will, of course, land at Waterkloof. I know that the Foreign Affairs Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, will land at Waterkloof tomorrow. And I know that the President of China, Xi Jinping, later today, he is going to land here at OR Tambo. And it's not something strange. It does happen, particularly when you have a big summit and interest and delegates and people arriving in their country. Yeah. And of course, those countries then do make requests to say we want a private facility or we want the military base. And therefore, China and Brazil chose a private facility that is OR. But I think for me, it's good for the country, particularly when you look at the issues that are related to tourism, to showcase the aviation system of South Africa in terms of the private facilities that you have, and remind people post-COVID-19 that you have OR Tambo International, a busy hub and with good facilities.
Yeah, I mean, the program really, as we get into the week, Sophie, I mean, chock-a-block, to be quite honest with you. We know that President Lula da Silva, of course, not arriving alone. He's bringing a delegation of his own. He will be alongside the First Lady of Brazil. We know that he's brought various ministers with him as well. In fact, hearing over the weekend that he is arriving with a new ministry in Brazil as well, called the Ministry of Racial Inequality. So some interesting conversations then. If you look at the role that these ministers then are going to be playing over the next week, right? I imagine they'll be meeting with their South African counterparts, their Chinese counterparts. So quite a few themes then that will be covered over the week.
Well, you are correct. You'll have the summit for the 5 leaders. You will then have a summit for the 5 leaders including African heads of state and government who are coming. You will also have a broader forum where you will have leaders from the South and those that have been invited who are not necessarily from the continent and also not from the BRICS family. And therefore, you will have those different interactions. But on the margins of this summit, you will then have leaders deciding in terms of who they want to meet, particularly in relation to bilaterals, because you have lots and lots of leaders from different countries. So you can take forward some of the issues that you have to discuss. And therefore, I think it will be a moment for we are moving, we have a problem, we have to constantly move. So I'm saying the issue of culture, I'm not surprised that Brazil is also looking at that. And we know that the other issue is that he is going to visit other countries. I know Angola because of the relationship. And therefore, I think for President Lula, this is an African trip.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be seeing as part of the program, Sophie, because any time, and I think what we can agree on is certainly 2023 has been a busy year for the President and the Department of International Relations, where we've seen so many bilateral meetings taking place with various leaders from various countries. And then there's the pomp and ceremony, you know, the 21-gun salute. How does that look when you've got multiple leaders arriving in the country? What does that program look like? When do we see that pomp and ceremony of the military?
Well, we know that the president has got a heavy program international. Yesterday, he pointed out that he wants to strengthen the relations. And you know that he will be going to the G20 summit next month. He is going to go to the United Nations General Assembly. On the margins of the United Nations General Assembly, you will have that climate summit. And you know that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, will be in the country. And I think the president will continue in strengthening the relationship between South Africa and the world. But as he pointed out yesterday, the focus will be on Africa, particularly starting with the SADC region. And then it will be South-South and of course other regions. But the South-South and Africa priority for President Ramaphosa. You can see the president of Brazil has arrived, he has landed, and he is now stepping out of the plane accompanied by the First Lady. This is not the first time President Lula is visiting South Africa. He's no stranger to South Africa, as I pointed out that his relationship with South Africa dates back when he was the president and he left office and he is back. And now he is meeting our International Relations Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, who is here to receive him. But I think also when you remember COSATU at some point in time, they were very keen to adopt what was called the Lula program in terms of using the socialist policies organization, and therefore you can see here he is. He has arrived, President Lula. There he's greeting the officials. There he is greeting the officials. Mr. President, I'll try. Mr. President, back in the country, just watching those activities, as you can see, President Lula of Brazil. And Minister Naledi Pandor here to receive him, and South Africa showcasing the culture, and the president watching there, Naledi.
By South African cultural performers just hours before we see the kicking off of the 15th BRICS summit taking place tomorrow. And he's, of course, flanked by his First Lady, Lula da Silva, there with him. And this is going to be quite a big moment, not just for global geopolitics, but certainly for the 5 countries that are involved at a time like this. And perhaps, Sophie, let's talk a little bit about President Lula da Silva himself, right, if we can. I don't know if you're able to hear me, but to talk about just what he's represented for Brazil as well. I know that this would be his second tenure as leader of Brazil, Sophie. So let's talk a little bit about just the impact that Lula da Silva has had, particularly on the BRICS bloc and also on the country. Well, it seems our foreign news editor, Sophie Mokoena, they're unable to hear me. But as I was saying, of course, Lula da Silva now, president of the country, one of the founding members of